Welcome back. And now we'll move for the track number 2, Innovative Education track, shared by the track chair, Professor Hussein Ahmed, Head of Electronic Engineering Department at Khalifa University. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everybody. My name is Hussein Ahmed. I carry too many hats. I'm a professor at Khalifa University. Also, I'm the IEEE UAE section vice chair and the Middle East vice chair of the Middle East section of BCS. The first talk will be by Sabine Huber. She's a global education specialist from Intel Corporation. She has got her PhD from LMU Munich. She is an expert in using ICT for teaching languages, and she published many papers and titles in this area. Please join me in welcoming Sabine.
It's a great pleasure for me to speak here today. I think in education, every country's culture, tradition is connected very much uniquely to that one country. So when we talk about education, we should never forget the culture of the country, as well as the culture of teaching and learning that has taken place in that country so far. Now, when we think about digital tools for the classroom, it is not enough to think of tools only, because what we often find is we think we have an empty plate in front of us. But the question is that plate really so empty? Again, if we consider there's the cultural plate, there are things that only work in that culture, and we do certainly not want to lose them because we are introducing tools that might not suit 100% for that culture. So also the entry age, you're thinking about a project maybe in year 5. Kids in year 5 already have 4 or even more, if you include the kindergarten stage, of learning experience. So that plate is not really so empty. We really have to understand what's already on that plate. Are there things that we need to remove? Are there things that we need to reconsider? Or on another notion, especially with tools, what investments have already been made, and do we want to push them away? Is that really necessary? Or can we instead make good use of investments that have already been made in the last decades? And I'm thinking of investments not only in infrastructure or in areas of physically holdable devices or things like that. I'm thinking of investments in professional development. Imagine the teachers, and I've been a teacher myself for 12 years, who have had trainings on various aspects. Do they want to move these aspects away, forget about these trainings? Wouldn't they consider that for themselves, the extra time that they invested, as a misinvestment, if you're not recurring and making good use of that? On another notion, and you might feel you have had that kind of food yesterday, so these photos are taken actually in that restaurant here. Sometimes we forget about the personal preferences. There are people who come from a cultural area where they want to have their bread. So I'm from Germany, and bread, as you know, is something that I think we're quite good at. There are other cultures that have other types of bread, and then there are cultures who simply are not so familiar with bread. So do they really want bread or not? And this is this breadth of involving technology in a purposeful and sustainable way in education. Sometimes when we define tools, we might look only at the outside of the tools. So we are defining, for example, innovation and learning that might be a tablet, and then we are talking about should that be a 7-inch screen or a 10-inch screen. But in the end, is it really the outside that matters so much? Or why don't we look inside? Maybe the inside you're finding in your original definition looks a little bit fishy, like here on this fish food. Maybe you really want to consider, do I have extra budget so that when I open the box, there's something in that box? And it's not just the outside that people are talking about from a high level, from a policy level also, and we're not bringing it down to the actual usability. Maybe there's 50% in that classroom that simply don't eat fish, where they say, fish, that's not my food, I'm sorry. On another notion, when we talk about tools, we need to consider, are these tools healthy? Apart from defining tools from the outside, from maybe software, from content and services, do you need other things that maybe have nothing to do with technology? Maybe you need to train the kids also on a healthy usage of educational tools. Maybe the teachers need extra help so that they can give the kids the best learning experience, where they have this whole range of tools and they are taught about, is it okay to go to the internet all the time? Does that make sense? Does it for a kindergarten kid make sense that they have the full open internet and they have not a course, any kind of training, what they do if they find something that is not suitable for their age group? So brain food, healthy food is a very important aspect to consider. Also, is it the right thing to talk about educational tools for kids in the sense of the kindergarten kid as well as the high school and university learners? Can they have the same kind of tool? If you think of a big kitchen where you have an expert chef, and that chef might be a sushi chef, and he uses that really sharp knife, I would not like to see that expert tool, the sharp knife, in the hands of a learner, of a very young learner, of a beginner. So you need purpose-built tools for different age groups. And also you need to provide choice. And choice oftentimes comes in small pieces. You don't want to throw the whole buffet to your learners, which might be confusing for both sides, the teacher and the learner. So you give them choice options. You make them try it out. If they like it, they come to the buffet again, to the learning tools buffet, and say, I need something where I can touch it. So next time when I go to the learning buffet, I take something where I can touch it maybe in a different way. But providing them the choice within a framework. So here in that picture, you see this is a buffet for desserts. So your umbrella topic here is clearly defined by the teacher, who has had a lot of training on how to design, to arrange that learning buffet. The topic is clear, but within that framework, within the topic, there's choice for the learner preferences. And it should be also nutritious, easy to digest. And by easy, I don't mean it should be just game fun all the time. There can be demanding areas. We've seen yesterday interesting tools where the kids have cards where they have to write their ideas on for kids. And I know that from my own teaching. They call it a lot of work, and they love it. Now, if we think of that buffet where the teacher has to arrange the ice, because the teacher knows if I'm serving fresh fish, it might be a tricky, heavy meal if this fish is not served on an ice plate. So the teacher designs the learning arrangement, puts the right amount of ice in there, puts the right plate there, and gives choice. So the teacher gives this security area where the kids have the secure learning environment. It's not that the teacher gives all the tools to them and just says, try it out, and later on, the kid's learning stomach has a little bit of trouble. We don't want to see that for sure. Another area that is, I think, very important, in particular from a cultural point of view, you need to have a localized buffet, localized content, for example. And by localized, I mean, again, this is sweets. But maybe if you look around the world and we stay in that analogy of food for the moment, you might find something like an Italian sabayone, which has ingredients that are culturally not acceptable because, as you know, in a Sabine there's alcohol, and you would never put that locally on your localized content buffet. And I think it is exactly the same if you're talking about English language learning for your region here. You want to have it adapted to your own language, which is from language learning, always important to integrate it in where your own words come from. But it is also important that you really look at what is already there, what do you need, and what do you not need. To know what you don't need from a content perspective, I think is a choice that we have to make when we consider the element content as a very important, relevant element. So all that tool selection and the policies to be able to select the right tools is really designed for food for learning. It's choice, it is likes and dislikes, it's to develop the gourmet palate so that you know, I just don't like that, but I have tried it out. A small amount, it didn't kill me, but I can say I don't learn like this. So I need to hear it, I need to speak, for example. Another area I don't want to neglect is tools for collaboration. So we are not talking about a learning environment where there's only, like in the classic didactic triangle, you would have content, the teacher, and the learner, and they would be in constant communication with each other. In this model, we recognize that the kids make conscious decisions. So they use their brains, cognition. They communicate with the outside world of the classroom, but also, of course, inside. And in particular, they collaborate with the person sitting next to them. They're not in a virtual learning environment, at least for much of the kindergarten to 12 stage. They need to, in this safe environment, train how to collaborate. So it's developing skills and competences, and we talk a lot about teaching methods and teaching strategies, but we need to move to learning methods, learning strategies, so that I can develop the skill step by step to become a lifelong learner in that safe environment. So in order to select the right elements of that buffet of content, of tools, of hardware, and very important services, you have to understand what is the learner style. So maybe you need a tool where the person who wants to listen to that but does not have the content available today has a microphone, so the person speaks in there, reads the text, let's say it's a biology text, records that, and then later on listens to his or her own voice, or you share the material with the person sitting next to you. The difference between a computer lab and a new modern learning environment really is you have tools where you can together explore things. You're trying things out, what then happens is negotiation of meaning. So you're developing an understanding how things might work. You're questioning it yourself, you're trying it out, you see the robot does work, does not work, depending on what you do, and you're asking the person in your area, did that work for you? What did you do so that it worked for you? And both, you need to provide the infrastructure, the learning environment, the learning space also, where you have any time where you need it, the chance to look at that on your own. But then, if you want to clarify, if you want to negotiate, then you have the group of learners around you. Another area that was mentioned yesterday, and I think it's extremely important, is explaining that learning does not stop at the end of the classroom as a box. Learning takes place beyond the classroom, on the way to home, it takes place in the bus, it takes place in the school garden, somewhere in a museum. Make sure you have the trained teachers to facilitate that so that the kids can bring back that rich learning experience back to the classroom. Overall, it is really important that the tools fit. Maybe you have made investments in professional development, but the professional development investment went in that section, whereas the tools, the infrastructure you're purchasing is on, not completely, but maybe on a little bit the opposite side. So if the screwdriver and the screw doesn't match, it is not worth the investment. So thinking before a project usually helps here. And then there's another use of tools that we oftentimes see. There's something already there. We maybe neglect the teacher professional development. We are thinking and aiming for sustainability, and we're making the best, maybe or maybe not, use of the tools we have. But I would say on the right side, here the books that are under that table leg, the broken table leg, it might not be the best return on invest on these, let's say it's very expensive university science papers to just fix that table. You might find different tools for such kind of usage, or you don't want to just sleep on a pile of theoretic knowledge, whereas you can bring it to life in your everyday classroom experience. So all in all, we have to think more about categories of what tools, what areas do we need to cover when we're talking about successful projects in education. What is education change management and has nothing to do with technology, and what are tools that I can purchase for money because I design it. And there are on the one side tools for the teacher's hands, and on the other side tools for the learners. So to summarize, you have to really consider all of the elements of the education transformation wheel. If you leave one of the elements as a big question mark, you're later on not making the best use of your monetary, of your time, and also even more important, I think, of the generation that we are designing our learning environments, our learning spaces for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
We have time for a couple of questions. Any questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for beautiful delivery of this lecture. Actually, it is very, very informative way of presenting this important item. Nevertheless, as you know, now you talked about two elements here, teachers and learner. Learner understood that it is probably have to do with us, decision maker, for example, in the United Arab Emirates. What we need to give them, and according to your buffets, various of food, various whatever, we need to this way understand and therefore feed them, let us say. Mm-hmm. But one is, we may have a problem with the teacher, especially those who are coming to here, for example, to help us. One is, do they keep in mind such facts? Two is, what about when it comes to the cut and run implementer? Because at the end of the day, we are not technology creator. We are still consumer. When we attract such technologies, state of the art, I believe, because when it comes to the cultural transfer know-how, it was addressed long time ago by a Dutch, Dr. Trumpenaar, and then State of America, IBM. But that was only for the investment in the ICT, and that to be dealt by adults. But now we are talking about very important issue as you addressed. Now I wouldn't lecture here, but to say something here. And as you know, in the, let us say, GCC and Middle East actually, we have a scriptive type of user, teacher, end user, powered user. We don't have achievement type. So cut and run company comes to us. They want us to take a decision about their product, which in the end of the day, as you said, may be wrong buffet to the wrong guys or wrong learner. How you will advise us, let us say, according to very meaty lecture or items you present to us, how to deal with cut and run companies, how to deal with the classical user or a script of user in this manner and in this concept?
I would say one element here is distributed leadership. So I would see the leadership from the Emirati side, where you say you write a tender And in that tender, it's up to you what specifications you bring in there. One way of seeing a tender is it's a 7-inch screen, it's a 10-inch screen, whatever specs in there, technology specifications. Why not include other elements in there that are non-technical? For example, a certain training you want for students in the country, a certain training competence level for the teachers. Merge that instead of looking at one element focusedly. Look at several ones. Maybe you can include that in a tender. That would be one thing. The other thing is distributed leadership, raising awareness with the teachers that this is not a project that is done to make their life more difficult, but it actually can be a project where their life is going to be much easier, because they, and I see that really worldwide, are in a position where they can feel, bodily feel, education is changing, because the kids at home have different infrastructure and different learning opportunities than they had 20, 30 years ago. So they want help. Now the question is, how can you cleverly make them feel they are really part of that project? And I think communicating that distributed leadership is one of the elements where it can be really successful.
So the conclusion is to put a chapter للتصل as example for non-technical issues such as cultural transfer of the know-how and ICT لتصل.
Yeah.
But if I can follow up, how about you as lecturer, lecturing our, let us say, children, kids, or whatever? First of all, how you will handle such aspect of culture? Secondly, would you stick to the principle and concept which are now, for example, you are teaching us? Thirdly, what if there is kind of cheating by those, let us say, excuse me for this, visiting lecturers? The curriculum or syllabus something, and they will teach our children something else. How to control? Is there any idea to control this?
I think for control, I would describe control as some kind of secure learning environment. There's, again, technical components that need to be in place, no question, where it's an automated way of approaching that. On the other side, if we believe people have a lot of knowledge and they want to acquire skills, so not assuming of those who do not want to learn, assuming they who want to learn are taken serious, approach their awareness and set policies, write them down and make it obligatory for the teachers and also the students, maybe in a student-teacher contract where even a 5-year-old kindergarten person needs to sign it with whatever signs if they are not able to write at that point, saying, I am obliged to do this and that and to not do this and that in the classroom, so that they are made aware of this is what is acceptable and this is what is not acceptable.
Fine, you will say I love pizza when it is hot. But then how you will explain it to me? You love pizza when the weather is hot, or when it is, carries hot sauce, or when what? When just cooked. So that's the problem with us now. And
that is up to you how big the framework actually is. It's your choice to make the framework that big with a lot of freedom, or you have a different policy where you limit it. And that might be experience related, it might be that teachers have different levels of competencies that you might introduce, it might be that students, depending on their age and knowledge, are in a different framework.
Will answer. To me, it will answer. Thank you.
Can we have another question from the... Yes, please. Over there. Can you take the mic?
Thank you. My name is Adil Risk, manager of Gamma Learn. I have impression and just comment about Dr. Hisham. The comment it comes that actually inside UAE there is a good industry for software, and I believe maybe we'll have a chance to show this one. But the question here, based on yesterday's meeting and today's as well, I'm feeling that we are focusing on the students to be as the new teacher. Actually, this is kind of thought. Besides this one, everything is based around the student now. I'm feeling that there will be a gap in the future, since in the beginning, early session of today, we're speaking about cooperation between students to make the contents. Okay? So I need just to hear from you if this perspective could add something to the educational environment, or it will change strategies. Plus, the idea of multiple track for each students to be graduated. Yesterday was speaking about adaptive learning, adaptive assessment. Okay? Can we just highlight this one a little? Thank you.
Sure. I think what we have to assume here is when the student is in the center of the interest, that overall, from an institutional perspective, school is an institution that was created to make kids learn. Teachers are absolutely essential, no question. But first and foremost, that institution is for the student. When we talk about student-centered learning, I'm a big fan of teacher-centered learning. I can tell you what I mean by that. It's not, I guess, what you think I mean by that. I'm standing in a classical teaching setup right now. I'm somewhere at the front of the class, and you are sitting there. I'm active, you're actively thinking. If I'm actually moving, and I don't have a mobile mic, otherwise I would do it right now. If I'm moving around that classroom, then I am also in the center of that classroom. So my proximity to that student that might have a question but would be too shy to ask that question in front of the class could be answered right away. If I have the learning and teaching environment together without a gap. We're talking about the flipped classroom, which does not mean that I'm standing at the back of the classroom, and I'm saying that in that funny way because I've seen that in personal teaching where kids had laptops, for example, and the teacher wanted to control them and went therefore to the end of the classroom. So assessment is a question of how do we design assessment? What is the purpose of assessment? Is that marks? Or is it that we can combine the learning process with consulting the kids, what do you already know, and where are the areas where we really need to make sure that you are getting better? So doing a test at the beginning of the class in the morning, telling the kids, if you don't move in this direction, you are training things you already know, and you're not moving up the next level. Okay. Thank you. I think we need to move on.
Okay.